Imagine walking down a narrow cobblestone street in the middle of summer. The air is thick, hot, and smells of dust and sickness. Suddenly, you see a woman step out into the middle of the road. She does not speak. She does not look at anyone. She simply begins to dance. But this is not a dance of joy. There is no music, no laughter, and no celebration. Her face is blank, her eyes are wide and staring into nothingness, and her movements are wheeled violent and uncontrollable. She dances through the morning, through the hot afternoon sun, and into the dark, cold night. Her feet begin to bleed, her muscles tear, and she is gasping for air, but her body refuses to stop. This is not a scene from a horror movie. This is a true historical event that took place in the year 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, which is now part of modern-day France. What began with this one single woman quickly transformed into one of the most terrifying, bizarre, and deadly epidemics in human history. It became known as the Dancing Plague of 1518, a mysterious event that baffled the greatest minds of the medieval world and continues to puzzle scientists, historians, and doctors even today. The date was July 14th, 1518. The woman was Frau Troffer. For reasons that no one could comprehend, she simply could not stop moving. Her husband begged her to sit down. Her neighbors gathered around her, watching in absolute disbelief and horror. She danced until her shoes were soaked in blood. She danced until she collapsed from sheer, utter exhaustion, falling onto the dirt street in a pool of her own sweat. But the nightmare did not end there. The moment she woke up, before she could even drink water or speak a word, her legs began to twitch and she stood up to dance again. This went on for 6 straight days. Within a week, the madness began to spread. It was as if an invisible, highly contagious virus was traveling through the air, hijacking the brains of anyone who looked at her. By the end of the first week, 34 other people had joined Frau Troffer in her endless, silent dance. They did not want to dance. They were crying out in agony, screaming for mercy, and begging their families to hold them down. But even when people tried to hold them, their limbs would fight back, jerking and jumping with a strange, unnatural strength. By August, the situation had escalated into a full-blown catastrophe. Over 400 people were now dancing uncontrollably in the streets of Strasbourg, under the burning, merciless summer sun. The city was not prepared for this. There were no hospitals, no modern medicine, and no understanding of psychological illnesses. Soon, the physical toll of this endless movement began to claim lives. People's feet were worn down to the bone. Their joints were dislocated, and their lungs were failing. The elderly and the weak were the first to go. Dozens of people were dying every single day from heart attacks, strokes, ruptured blood vessels, and pure physical exhaustion. The streets of Strasbourg had turned into a literal graveyard where the dead and the dying were surrounded by hundreds of people who were still desperately moving their feet to a silent rhythm. The city authorities and the local doctors were completely terrified. They needed to find a solution, and they needed to find it fast. The doctors of the time examined the dancers and came up with a diagnosis that sounds absolutely insane to us today. They believed that the dancers were suffering from a disease called hot blood. According to the medical theories of the 16th century, the only way to cure hot blood was to let the victims burn it off. They believed that if the people just kept dancing, they would eventually exhaust the disease and be cured. So the city council made a decision that would go down in history as one of the most disastrous medical mistakes ever made. Instead of locking the dancers away, resting them, or feeding them, the city built massive wooden stages in the middle of the public squares. They cleared out the busy marketplaces to give the dancers more room. And to make sure they kept moving, the authorities actually hired professional musicians, bagpipe players, and drummers. They even hired strong, healthy citizens to hold up the dancing victims when they were about to fall, forcing them to stay on their feet. This was a catastrophic mistake. The loud pounding beat of the drums and the haunting melodies of the bagpipes did not cure the sickness. Instead, it acted as a catalyst. It created a massive, hypnotic spectacle that drew healthier citizens into the madness. People who had just come to watch the horror suddenly found their own feet moving. They lost control of their minds and joined the deadly dance floor. The music fueled the mass hysteria, and the death toll skyrocketed. So, what could have possibly caused this terrifying phenomenon? Over the last 5 centuries, historians, scientists, and psychologists have tried to solve this mystery, leading to 3 major theories. The first theory is ergot poisoning. Ergot is a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye wheat, which was the main ingredient used to make bread in medieval Europe. When humans consume bread contaminated with ergot, they suffer from a condition called egotism. This fungus contains chemicals that are highly similar to LSD. It causes severe hallucinations, vivid nightmares, and violent muscle spasms. Many historians believe that the people of Strasbourg had eaten bad bread, which caused them to hallucinate and dance. However, modern scientists have pointed out a major flaw in this theory. Ergot poisoning restricts blood flow to the limbs. It causes gangrene, making it extremely painful to even walk, let alone dance intensely for days and weeks. It is physically impossible for someone with ergot poisoning to have the stamina to dance until they die of exhaustion. This brings us to the second and much more widely accepted theory: mass psychogenic illness, commonly known as mass hysteria. To understand this, we have to look at what life was like in Strasbourg in 1518. It was a time of extreme suffering. The region was experiencing devastating crop failures, leading to widespread famine and starvation. Deadly diseases like smallpox, leprosy, and syphilis were wiping out entire families. The psychological stress, fear, and hopelessness felt by the population were at an all-time high. When the human mind is subjected to such extreme, prolonged trauma, it can trigger a physical reaction. Frau Troffer's sudden breakdown may have acted as a trigger for a community that was already on the verge of a psychological collapse, causing a domino effect of shared delusion. There is also a religious aspect to this mass hysteria. In the 16th century, the people of Strasbourg believed in a saint named Saint Vitus. According to church legend, Saint Vitus had the power to curse sinners by forcing them to dance uncontrollably. Because the people genuinely believed in this curse, their extreme guilt and fear of God actually manifested as the very curse they feared. They believed they were cursed, so their minds forced their bodies to play out the curse. By September of 1518, the epidemic finally began to fade. The city authorities realized their musical stages were a failure. They banned all public dancing and music. The surviving dancers were loaded onto wagons and taken to a mountaintop shrine, dedicated to Saint Vitus in the nearby town of Severe. There, the victims were given small red shoes, led around an altar of the saint, and sprayed with holy oil. Slowly, over several weeks, the trance-like state wore off. The silence returned to Strasbourg, leaving behind hundreds of graves and a mystery that would never truly be solved. Was it a toxic chemical in their food? A massive psychological breakdown of an entire society? Or something far more sinister that science cannot explain? The true story of the dancing plague of 1518 remains one of the darkest and most fascinating chapters in human history. If you want to dive deeper into the mysteries of the past, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join us on History Beyond Time. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.